As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Kat is a beacon of transformation in our scarcity-laden society who is on a mission to teach others how to embrace the mantra that everything happens for you, not to you. Fueled by a personal journey through trauma and abuse, Kat shifted her narrative from victimhood to empowerment. As a coach, speaker, author, and podcaster, she candidly shares her tumultuous path from teen pregnancy to a decade in an abusive relationship to inspire others to rewrite their stories. As the visionary behind the Lotus Effect, Kat passionately guides individuals to glean wisdom from their past, transforming it into a compass for a radiant future. Having trudged through life's mud, she intimately understands the struggle to see the beauty ahead. Kat advocates fiercely for reconnecting with our true selves, urging us to discard external influences and navigate our journey based on our beliefs, not societal dictates. In her unwavering pursuit, Kat invites us to reclaim our power and stride confidently towards a brighter tomorrow. Hey, Kat, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
you are so welcome. I'm super excited to be here. So,
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Let's start right in. Just what is your secrets? What is your secret ninja skill, or what is the ninja skill that you're really, really good at?
ooh, the secret ninja skill. I love that. Like, what a unique way to ask that question. Well, I feel like I have a couple of secret ninja skills, and including eyes in the back of my head for my kids. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I think that's just a mom thing.
I think that's a mom
I
thing.
would
Yeah.
I think it's just a mom thing. I would say my super secret ninja skill is meeting people where they are at in
Mhm.
their business and giving them the space to open up about where their challenges are, and then
Mhm.
be able to innately understand how we can craft something specifically for them that they're going to continue wanting to use. And it's not something that I just came up with and put them into a structure and said, this should work. So I'm really great at taking people's puzzles apart,
Okay.
and then putting them back together a little bit differently so that they fit a little bit easier.
Interesting. Now, do you use like a specific structure to do this, or is there a framework you use that you've developed for it? How specific you do that? Like, what if you had like 5 business development people in front of you? Like, what would make you stand apart? What's your UVP? What's your unique value proposition?
Ooh, what is my unique? Mine actually is not structured, so I prefer it that way. For me, especially based through my background and the things that I have been through personally and professionally, I have a really unique ability to understand people at their core, and I'm actually
Mhm.
working on human design as well to be able to utilize that in understanding how people tick, and then building something based on that piece. So we can start super simple from mindset and just time management and setting boundaries, all the way up to what type of implementation do you need within your business. Now, that is going to have a little bit more structure to it because we're going to be hitting specific target points in your business to help either delegate the team you already have, help you hire a team, do the implementation, some OBM work. So there's a couple different pieces depending on what someone needs. But I always laugh when people say, what is your structure? What is your, because I don't fall into that. And the reason I don't is because every time I looked at a coach and I hired someone that had this really laid out boxed structure, I never
Mhm.
fit into their pieces. And while that's great for some people, and I think procedures and everything are fantastic, I'm a process-based person. If I can create something that uniquely aligns with how your brain functions, you are going to
Mhm.
utilize that plan 10 times more than if I tell you, this is the structure in the system, this is what you should be doing. And if you just follow this, you'll be successful, because not everybody's brain works the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that some people like structure, some people don't. Depends on it's an individual thing, and it also depends on what specific um industry you're in. Some will be different than
Yeah.
others. There's some that have to be highly structured, there's some that are not highly structured and can't be. And I think it's really interesting, just to kind of see those differences. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And everybody kind of has their own loose structure. And that's what you tend to find out when you're working with people. But if you can understand the basis of how they work or what their habits are naturally that they kind of flow with, then you can structure something around that. So you still have a loose structure, but it
Mm.
just fits more naturally with how they already work.
Mm. Now, how did you come across this? Like what life events, like what series of events had to happen to get you to go into this space?
Oh, wow. Well, there's a lot of series of events. No, my my background is in medical administration, and I've actually been training and teaching for over 15 years. And through those processes and doing that in different industries, including real estate and chiropractic and things like that, I just realized that if you can build something the way that somebody understands it, they'll
Mhm.
actually follow it better than if I just give them my own set plan. And that actually was through
Mhm.
my own pitfalls. When I first started in medical administration, I was like, this is the system. This is how you do it. This is how I train you. Right. And then I actually had someone that was like, yeah, but if you would allow me to kind of tweak it on the way that it works for me, I can still follow kind of what you're telling me. She's like, but
Mhm.
I'll get it better. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? So, but that was really eye-opening to me. And it worked so beautifully. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, let's take a chance. So that's why I say, like, if you can come up with kind of that loose structure and parameters and processes of the direction things should go, and then ask a lot of questions to understand someone, that's what kind of helped. And then I just kind of kept tweaking it as I kept going. And I love being in that space. I've always enjoyed teaching and training people. And I have a sense to be able to pick up on what is bothering people when they're telling me the truth, when they're kind of passing over it. And, a lot of people would say that, my gosh, that's an awesome superpower. Well, yes, it is.
Mhm.
It actually kind of came out of my abusive situation because I had to learn to be very hyper aware, hyper vigilant, but
Mhm.
I have used it now for good. And it's kind of neat to see how it's kind of transitioned into this other superpower of being able to really understand what is going on with people.
Yeah, let's delve into a little bit of that about your background and where you came from for this, because I think that all of us have a story in the background, and that's one of the things I love doing. Is this was my story about where I've come from and how that's helped me to succeed. And for you, you've got a really interesting background that I think would resonate with a lot of people, that could do a lot of help as well, because I think that's one of the things we get with stories too, is that somebody resonates with it going, I'm in this situation, wow, she succeeded at this, I can succeed too, and now it becomes a catalyst for change. So go into a
Mhm.
little bit, if you would. Just tell me the story about how, that background and how that's helped you and how you
Yeah.
overcame it and what you did.
Sure. So if we want to take it way back for
Sure.
just a second. So I was always an ambitious, outgoing person. I've always enjoyed helping people. I've always the one that's been, I stand up for other people and get
Ah,
myself in trouble, kind of a thing. And when I was 16, I had, all these dreams and ambitions, but life kind of flipped itself upside down when I decided to follow the path of everyone else. I got a boyfriend just like everybody else, and I got pregnant at 16.
mm,
But through that, I graduated early. I went to college, had a full time job. And as I started kind of growing in that space, my family and I kind of started not seeing eye to eye.
mm,
My son's father at that time kind of disappeared. I mean, we were only 18, right? And
mhm.
I fell into another situation. So I found another guy that was like the complete opposite of my upbringing. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Um,
Yeah.
but what I didn't realize was that slowly in the process of being in that relationship, there were pieces of control. There were little things of segmentation and isolation to kind of start separating me from who I was and the people that I was around. And I just didn't realize it because it was super subtle. Like looking
Mhm.
back now, I'm like, oh yeah, those were red flags. But when you're in that situation, you just don't see, especially at that young of an age. So I spent 10 years in an abusive relationship, and I always like to digress. Abuse for me does not mean physical. A lot of people attribute that to physical only. Yes, there was a part of that in my relationship, but there was a lot of emotional and psychological abuse, which a lot of people can't show those scars or people don't see them. So
Mhm.
that was my background in that. I was the breadwinner, I was the housekeeper, I was the mother, I was anything you could think of. And at the age of 28, I finally got out and I started over. My boys were 10 and 7 at the time. And, I would love to tell people that like I changed my life. I
Mhm.
didn't. I continued on with what I needed to. And that was, I was a mom of 2 kids. I put myself back through school at night and I had a full-time job. And so those were my priorities.
Mhm.
But pushing off my mental health and pushing off those unhealed traumas, they came back up in PTSD, anxiety, and heart issues. And
Mhm.
so that's when I really had to reevaluate a couple years later of like, oh, this isn't working. And so I started kind of shifting how I dealt with myself. And then also when my kids got into their teenage years, because they're now 19 and 16,
Mhm.
I started realizing that some of the traumas I had dealt with, they were now pushing out and I was seeing it again. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to go deeper. And so that's kind of been the transition of my life over the past, gosh, I'd say 20 years of just really kind of learning how not to heal and how to
Mhm.
stay completely boxed up too. I really should probably deal with these because not only is it going to make me a better person, am I going to feel better? I'm going to be a better mother. And I'm also going to be able to communicate with my spouse and my business as well when I want to step into that. And so that's kind of where all that came from. So it's a long journey. I know, a lot of people say they kind of skip that middle part of the
Yes.
things, the crap show that we went through.
Yes.
So it was rough. It was definitely rough at times, but I've always been extremely determined to change something when I see a pattern doing the same thing. And so for me, challenge accepted.
Mhm.
And here
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
are.
Yep. Yep. And I think you bring up a really good point. And a lot of times in business that a lot of outsiders, or I call them the normies, the people that are not entrepreneurs, they look at this and they go, why are you doing this? Or they see, oh, well, you're rich, you have all this money. They don't see what
Mhm.
I call the suck. And those are the days when it's just like you're wondering to yourself, why the hell did I do this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And we all go through it, and it's a majority of what we do. It's talking about, I think there is something bipolar about the kind of up and down and up and down and up and down that we get as entrepreneurs. So I think it's nice that you mentioned that
Yeah.
there's that middle ground between super success and where you started, and that kind of bit that's difficult, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that more people need to hear about that and more people need to understand that because a lot of us turn to social media and we do listen to people's stories, but a lot of people tend to cut out the majority of that story because they want to tell you what they went through and highlight it, but then they want to really let you know where they're at now. Where I'm the opposite and I prefer to focus on, like you said, the suck,
Yep.
because so many more people can relate to that. And I found myself in that position of I was looking at everyone and where they were at now. And I was like, this sucks. I'm never going to be there. That's never going to be. I've already done all these things. I'm never going to make it. I failed here. And so for me, it was really important to bring more of those pieces in between to the surface so that people can relate to it, so that people can have that support, because I know what it's like to not have that and not feel like anybody else knows what my journey is.
Yeah. And I think there's a transition period between when you leave like a corporate job and you're transitioning into that entrepreneur world. That transition's difficult because most of the people that you have in your
Hmm.
friend circle have no idea what the hell you're going to go through as an entrepreneur. And
Oh yeah.
it's that kind of weird transition period. And as
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, we all go through it. It's our thing. And it's difficult because I mean, the people around you are going to try their hardest to help and support you. A lot of times they'll try to give you advice. It's so far outside their experience zone that they're not going to be able to really give what you need at that point. And it's hard, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and people are used to seeing one version of you. I heard this recently and I thought this was really cool was, the people that are around you, they're used to seeing this version. So when you kind of flip the script or you decide to go a completely different direction, they're not used to seeing that version. So it doesn't make sense and it also makes them uncomfortable, right? So they would prefer for you to stay where they know you because
Yeah.
then we have commonalities, right?
Yes.
And so it's an interesting shift and unfortunately, for a lot of people, including myself, you may lose people in
Mhm.
your life because of that. And it
Yeah.
may not necessarily be a bad thing, but the road can get lonely because
Yeah.
now you're thinking completely different. You're challenging yourself at different levels. And a lot of people don't understand that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's finding that new tribe as you continue to grow.
Very, very true. Yeah, people think that we're all sort of insane, and we are. I mean, for a certain level of crazy, in a good way. You know? And I saw a meme a while ago that said, if you're trying to build your business and live on the income, you have a crazy level of faith in what's going to happen. And
Oh,
because it's really
yeah.
sometimes what you're going on is just simple, sheer gumption and faith, and that's it. Just,
Oh, yeah.
it's going
Yeah,
to work. I have no idea how
100%.
the hell it's going to work. It's going to work.
You know what, though? I feel like sometimes that perspective in itself helps 10 times more than trying to just focus on all the logical pieces and move it in a specific pace. One thing that I realized with the entrepreneurial space is it is not always a linear journey. When you're
Yes.
in the corporate setting, it's, you do this, which gets you this, which means you could get a bonus or a pay raise and you can move to this level. Like it's very linear,
Mhm.
whereas the entrepreneurial space is not. And the more that you try to force that corporate linear thinking, the harder it's going to be, right? Like, or at least in my journey, and for a lot of people that I work with, I see the same thing because I did come from a corporate space. So I tried to incorporate that into my business. And then it was like, what? I don't understand why it works. It works there. Why isn't it working here? And it's like, yeah, you're not in the same setting. In case you didn't realize that,
Yeah.
we're going to switch things up.
Yeah. Well, especially as a small business, like once you get to a larger size, you can start to put some of the same structures around, that's used in corporate in
Yes.
a business, but much, much larger, like
Hmm.
millions at that point. It's the startups, when you first start, my first actual proper job, like my actual big boy job was as a junior programmer at a small med tech startup.
Okay.
And it was an interesting experience because I had not really done the corporate gig up and until that point, so I had a different viewpoint, and it was really fun. Then I get in the corporate world, and it's like, this isn't cool. It's like I can't go out and innovate. My job title isn't yes all, all of them. That's all I know what to do. But I think it's really different, and kind of now, is that something that you help people with? Is that transition? Is like, do you have some sort of special sauce that you use to help people with that transition between I'm going for my corporate job, I'm finally making enough in my startup to be able to support myself, but I want to now I have to make that to bridge that gap.
I love that. For me, it's more of the business life integration. I have
Okay.
some really great partners that love to work with startups that can bring them from the corporate into that space. That's not going to be my specialty. I
Mhm.
prefer those that are a little bit more established and ready to kind of go to that next level so that we can then take your foundations and what you've worked on building and we can amplify those. We can really step you up to the next level. And now we can really work on how do you take business and personal life, marry them together so you're not two separate people and you
Mhm.
can be in this what I consider an ebb and flow. A lot of people use balance. I think balance is bull crap when it comes to business and life, especially if you have kids. There is no freaking balance.
No.
So you have to be able to kind of ebb and flow into things. And when you have a corporate background structure, 9 to 5, 8 to 7, like whatever, that is your time. And when you come into an entrepreneurial space, especially as a parent, that isn't always the case. And so then you've got to reestablish like, okay, what do I do when crap goes wrong? And but my business is important, but I need to take care of this. And how can we lean in and out of those things so that I'm not so overwhelmed or I feel like I didn't get my work done or I feel like I'm completely and totally behind? Like, how can we integrate those two pieces together? Because ultimately, trying to be one person here and then put this face on here is exhausting.
Yeah.
So let's put them together because that's where the entrepreneurial space is. And then how can we flow in and out of that? And then that allows you to give yourself a little bit of grace. You can learn to then set those boundaries that aren't necessarily taught in corporate,
Mhm.
and then you can really understand like, okay, this is where I am. This is where I want to go. Now, how can I move to the next level? Because I know how I want my business and my life to flow with each other.
Mhm. And I think that's one thing that the transition can make the transition difficult is that, like I say in the intro of the podcast, why we left our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Or an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. There's a reason. And
Yeah.
that sort of, like you say, that flow is very different. It's just a different style. And it
Hmm.
doesn't match what we've been taught as far as the corporate world is concerned, where you go home at 5 o'clock and you're done. Not
Yep.
building a company. It's not realistic. But also understanding how not to burn yourself out and go in a completely different direction with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that, again, depending on how you work, how you're wired, can really help in understanding how you want to run your business, right? Like a lot of people will say, okay, well, I'm going to work from 8 to 5 on my business and then just deal with my kids afterwards, or just be with family afterwards. But then you find out, like I just had a client recently and she's like, well, that's what I've been doing. She's like, and I was like, show me your calendar. And
Mhm.
like all these empty spaces were in the morning. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, I'm so tired in the morning. I was like, okay, well, when do you shine? And she was like, well, usually about 2. And I was like, oh girl, we need to flip your schedule. Like we need to
Mhm.
flip it. Let's work things with you and how you naturally work, not try to fit you into somebody else's programming, because that's what you've been innately taught. So then, you can do subtle tasks in the morning that don't take a lot of brain power, that can get you through. And then when you're ready to like hit it hard, then you take a break with your family. And then, do you have another time where you're like, I'm ready to go again? And she's like, yeah, like around 8 o'clock. And I'm like, girl, okay, great. Well, let's put
Mhm.
your schedule around that way. Like that's the beauty about entrepreneurship as well, is it doesn't have to fit in that 8 to 5 or 7 to 6. Like we can actually switch it up. So if you're a late night owl, okay, let's run your business that way. Like it's
Mhm.
fine. Like we have the ability to do that, but a lot of people aren't taught that and they don't have the confidence to move into that space. Well, let
Yeah.
me help you structure that out. Let's bring that confidence up, because then you're going to want to work on your business. Then you're going to want to strive to have clients. Your posts, the things that you write, the stuff that you talk about, it's going to come out in a completely different light than if you're
Mhm.
forcing it because of someone else told you to do.
And I think that's something that we hear a lot of, where it's like, here's my morning wake up routine. And I'm up at 4 and I do this and I do that.
There's no
And
way. I'm just saying. I am not a 4 a.m. girl. Okay. I'm not.
exactly. And I think that there's this perception out there that you have to do that to be a high performer. It
Yeah.
might not be the case. There might be another way around. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Because I've never been a 4 a.m. person. I'm just not. I'm an early bedtime, excuse me, like 9, 10 o'clock. I'm like, we can chill on the couch, I'm ready to go sleep. But that's just
Mhm.
who I am naturally, right? And so it's like, why am I beating myself up to be a part of the 5 a.m. club when everybody's
Mhm.
like, you should get up early and then you have this space? And I'm like, and every time I get up, I hate myself and I hate life and I don't want to make my
Mhm.
coffee. And then when I get into my day, I'm already in a crappy mood. So
Yeah.
like, what's the point
Yeah.
in doing that? And hey, for all of you people that get up at 4 in the freaking morning, like kudos to you. Okay.
Mhm.
I get that.
Mhm.
And I do get that it takes discipline
Yeah.
for certain things. However, there's no reason why we can't work with the natural state of how our bodies work, so that that natural energy comes out and we don't feel like we're forcing it.
Yeah. True. So true. So now I know you alluded to it a little bit in the beginning of the podcast, but I want to just ask the question and transition. So how would you take, or what is the bridge between what you experienced in your past relationships? How are you applying that information? So beyond just kind of saying I can read people really well, what takeaways did you get from that history that you're now using to help other business owners move forward?
Ooh, I like that, because I love incorporating what it is that I've been through. So
Mhm.
I have taken the things that I experienced in my abuse, and I have incorporated them to meet people where they're at, which means for a lot of people, there is some type of trauma. There is some type of people pleasing, perfectionism, no boundary setting. There are issues there that I have experienced. I was a professional at, let me tell you. And I can help alleviate that. So I get to use that. That's my special power. And that's not because somebody taught me how to get rid of it. I trial and errored myself and figured out ways to do it, which for me worked in very small ways.
Mhm.
And so that's what I get to take people through. So using the things that I experienced and being able to actually fully understand when someone says, I can't let go. I've
Mhm.
got to keep fixing this because it's not perfect. I understand that to my core. I'm not giving you advice because I read some book. I'm not giving you advice because I took some certification. No offense, everybody. I read
Yep.
books and do that stuff too.
Yep.
But the experience that I have, I understand that feeling to my absolute core. And I understand that when it comes to dealing with things like that, you need someone that can support you, that can be open with you, that does not judge you for what it is that you're going through, and allows you a safe space to now work on those, and then says, okay, well, then let's start small. Not, well, then if you would just do this, you'd be fine. If you would just start saying no, you'd be fine. That doesn't work for everybody. And I know that because it didn't work for me. You know, years I tried saying no and getting out of my relationship, it didn't work. There's other things that we can do. And so those are the kinds of things that I like to wrap into my teachings and my coaching, is really just being vulnerable and open for other people to connect with. Because I feel like if you can create connection and people can say, I'm going through this, and I can say, oh, I know exactly how you're feeling. Hold on. And then I can give them a story and they're like, oh my God, yeah, no, that's exactly what's going on. That is where people open up. That is where change happens, because now you're not just telling someone, yeah, no, I understand this, but this is what you should do. I'm actually sharing with you the details, and we are on the same wavelength. And now you feel like you can trust me. And now you're going to be more apt to actually hearing what I'm telling you, so that I can help you move out of those muddy waters.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's actually, so beyond just the business side of things, if I remember correctly, there is also something else that you're doing as well, to an organization that you're trying to build to help. Do you want to tell people a little bit more about that too?
Oh, so we are talking. Let's say, hold on, we got a couple of things that I'm working on. So
I know the feeling.
I am working with the Domestic Violence Center to do some speaking and some pieces with them. And that really is a soft spot for me to be able to connect and share on a different level. So one of the things I am working with that organization and in general is speaking out more about emotional and psychological abuse, and how that affects not only people that are going through it, but how the judicial system sees it, how our police officers see it, because they are the ones that make a difference in where we go, how we perceive things, and if we're going to make the jump to say, I want to get out of this. And so I think that we need to start sharing, or I need to start sharing more of the in-depth pieces of my journey and allow people to actually ask questions, because curiosity and allowing people to have that space is how you get people to understand where you're coming from. And I understand that not a lot of people can do that. And I'm not saying everybody needs to, but one of the things that I am really good at doing is being able to break that down and say, this is my thought pattern. This is why I made that decision. This is what led to this. This is what I was feeling. And I think that that gives people a completely different perspective, that those that have not been in that situation can go, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. I wouldn't have understood that if you wouldn't have told me, because I was that person, right? Before I had that relationship, I was like, I don't understand. Like, just freaking leave. Like, if anybody ever treated me like that, there's no way I would deal with that. But it's not like a lot of the times that it happens in the first shot or in the first month. A lot of it is this really gradual game playing psychological crap. And by the time you realize what's going on, you're 5-6 years into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I specifically wanted to have you say that too, just because I wanted people to hear about this. There's another side to it too. It's not just helping people out with businesses. There's another aspect that you're helping out with as well, which I think is really admirable. Especially we've all been through stuff, and I think the biggest gift that we can give is to be able to use those experiences. And I would say that the biggest gift to ourselves we can give is to be able to use those experiences to help somebody else, so that way it was not in vain. And I think that's something that that you're doing absolutely with your organizations. So I really wanted to make sure we highlighted that, kind of got a little bit of that in there. So you can kind of talk that part up. But yeah, absolutely. So we're getting towards the end here, and I always have one thing that I ask people. And so I want to know, what is a book or podcast that you have heard? We can do multiples if you want. This is sort of a free format question. That really changed your life, that really had an impact on you, whether it's recently or when you read a while ago, like a book or podcast that has really had a positive impact on you.
Oh, goodness. Okay. There are a lot of those. So like I have 10,000 things floating around in my brain. So I'm glad you said that we could do more than one.
Exactly. I love it.
You know what though? I would say one of the books that made a huge difference, and actually there's a couple of them, but it's an author. Well, she's a speaker. Anyway, she does a lot of different things. She's a researcher. Her name is Brene Brown. And I have read several of her books,
Mhm.
including Dare to Lead and her book about perfectionism. And while some of her stuff is focused on corporate settings, she is what she calls a shame researcher.
Hmm.
And there's something about that that hit me so hard because through the things that I've been through, shame and guilt were huge components of why I didn't share things that I'd been through, why I didn't talk about stuff that other people had been through, and why I didn't want to relate. Like I would just stay in my shell because I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of people thinking I was a horrible mother because of what I went through. I was afraid that people wouldn't want to listen to me if they knew what I had been through, and so her books have been huge in just understanding that like we all face shame and guilt, but being able to be vulnerable and open about it creates such compassion and confidence in yourself, and then so many other people resonate with it. So I read her books, I listened to her on her social media channels. Like she is definitely one of my favorite people, and she's so real in how she speaks that you feel like she's speaking directly to you, and that made a huge impact on me.
Nice. Awesome. Cool, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really, really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I love this. I love this space. I love your energy. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited that I've had the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Kat, check out the link in the description.